You know, it's not every day that a major U.S. government report gets publicly challenged by the very people it's supposed to represent. But that's exactly what just happened. A brand new climate report from the Department of Energy is under fire, and the group raising the alarm is, well, it's a big one.
And I mean, we're not talking about just one or two dissenting voices here. More than 85 climate scientists have signed on to a joint rebuttal. They're claiming the report is riddled with errors and seriously misrepresents climate science. That is a significant number of experts, all pointing to the same problems.
So the big question is, what exactly are these supposed errors? What did the report get so wrong? Well, the scientists are focusing on two main points of contention. So let's dive in and break it all down. Okay, first up, the first major disagreement is all about something pretty fundamental to, all of us, agriculture. The government report made a surprisingly optimistic claim about the future of farming in the United States.
And here's the core of the disagreement right here. On one hand, you have the Department of Energy report claiming that rising CO2 could actually be a net benefit for U.S. crops. But on the other hand, the scientists are firing back, saying that conclusion is only possible because the report cherry-picks the data. Basically, it highlights the good and just ignores the bad. This quote really gets to the heart of their whole argument. The scientists say the report totally leaves out the negative side of the coin, like the impact of more heat and extreme weather on those very same crops. I mean, in their view, how can you possibly claim a net benefit if you're not even looking at all the variables?
All right, on to the second key issue. This one gets even more specific, and it's kind of fascinating because it all comes down to the definition of a single word: drought.
The report states very clearly that there's no evidence of more intense meteorological drought. Now, I want you to pay really close attention to that word, meteorological, because it's pretty much the entire key to this whole disagreement.
So, what on earth is a meteorological drought? Well, it turns out it's a very, very narrow definition. It only looks at one thing and one thing only: a lack of rainfall. It doesn't take anything else into account.
Which, of course, brings us to a pretty critical question. When you think of a drought, especially in a world that's getting warmer, is a simple lack of rain really the whole story?
The scientists argue absolutely not. They say a modern drought is more like a chain reaction. Sure, it might start with low rainfall, but then you have to factor in higher temperatures, which cause more evaporation, which basically just sucks moisture out of the ground that much faster.
And that is their big counterpoint. They argue that there are tons of studies showing how climate change, through that extra heat and evaporation, has in fact made droughts worse. So by using such a narrow definition, they believe the government report is missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so we've looked at the debates over agriculture and drought. But why does any of this academic back and forth really matter? Well, because it isn't just academic. It points to a much, much bigger issue about how science gets communicated, especially when that science is supposed to shape major national policy.
When you really boil it down, these 85-plus scientists are making some pretty serious accusations. They're not just correcting a few numbers here and there. They're accusing a government agency of deliberately cherry-picking data, ignoring negative consequences, and ultimately misrepresenting what the science actually says.
And this right here is the crucial point. This isn't really a fight over the raw data itself. It's a fight over interpretation and presentation. It shows how the exact same science can be framed to tell two totally different stories, one that sounds pretty optimistic and another that's way more cautionary. And that has huge implications when you think about who might only be hearing one side of the story.
And all of this leaves us with the final, really thought-provoking question that goes way beyond just this one report. In a world with such incredibly complex science, where the tiny details and definitions matter so much, how do we make sure that the full story, the whole, unvarnished truth is actually being told?